Freeze this image in your mind. It is the night of the Golden Globes, 2014. Leonardo DiCaprio has just won Best Actor for The Wolf of Wall Street. He stands on stage, radiant, holding the statue. In front of millions of viewers, he thanks his collaborators. He mentions Scorsese, the studio, and then he thanks a man almost nobody in the audience recognizes. He says, "To Joey, thank you for being not only an incredible collaborator, but a visionary." The camera cuts briefly to a VIP table. We see a young Asian man, round-faced, in a flawless tuxedo, smiling shyly. He looks like an exchange student who crashed the party. His name is Jho Low. And what nobody in that room knows, not the actors, not the journalists, not even DiCaprio himself, is that this night is the culmination of the largest financial heist of the 21st century. The movie they were celebrating, a story about stock market scammers and moral excess, was not fiction. It was a real-time documentary. Every cent used to film it, every launch party, every bottle of champagne at that table, had been paid for with money stolen from a sovereign wealth fund meant to feed and power the people of Malaysia. Welcome to the missing record. Today, we are going to dissect how a single man managed to evaporate $4.5 billion right under the noses of the world's most powerful banks, and how he used Hollywood to launder his crime in plain sight. To understand how you steal $1 billion, you first must understand the psychology of the thief. Jho Low was not born into poverty, but he did not belong to the royalty he pretended to be. He was born in Penang, Malaysia, into a comfortable family, but not ultra-rich. However, Low understood from a very young age a glitch in the social matrix of the elite. Perception is reality. He was sent to the prestigious Harrow School in London, and then to Wharton at the University of Pennsylvania. There, among the children of kings and oil tycoons, Low began to build his character. He pretended to be a Malaysian prince. He threw extravagant parties he couldn't afford, burning through his family's savings to rent limousines and buy access. His thesis was simple. If you spend like a billionaire, nobody asks to see your bank statements. It was in these circles that he met Riza Aziz, the stepson of Najib Razak, who would soon become the Prime Minister of Malaysia. That connection was the master key. When Najib Razak rose to power in 2009, Low presented him with a brilliant idea: create a sovereign wealth fund. The theory was solid. The government would borrow money from international markets to invest in strategic projects, power plants, tourism, infrastructure, that would generate profits for the Malaysian people in the long run. They called it 1MDB, One Malaysia Development Berhad. But from day one, 1MDB had a fatal structural flaw. Although Jho Low held no official position in the fund, his name was not on the payroll, nor on the board of directors. He was the puppeteer in the shadows. He gave the orders, he approved the transfers, and he had total control of the bank account. This is where the story stops being a simple theft and becomes a systemic scandal. Jho Low had the ambition, but he needed credibility. He needed Wall Street to validate his scam. Enter Goldman Sachs, and specifically, a star banker named Tim Leissner. For 1MDB to have money, it needed to issue debt. It needed to sell bonds to global investors. Goldman Sachs organized 3 massive bond issuances between 2012 and 2013. The code names for these operations were worthy of a spy movie: Project Magnolia, Project Maximus, and Project Catalyze. In total, they raised $6.5 billion. But there was something rotten in the numbers. Goldman Sachs charged astronomical fees for these services, nearly $600 million. To put that in perspective, the standard fee on Wall Street is 1 or 2%. Goldman charged nearly 10%. Prosecutors would later argue that this surcharge was the ignorance tax. Goldman was charging extra to look the other way, to ignore the red flags that were screaming fraud. The money entered 1MDB's coffers, and in a matter of hours, it left. Follow the money. $700 million from the first bond issuance was supposed to go to a so-called joint venture with a Saudi oil company called PetroSaudi. It was the perfect cover. Energy investment. But when the money hit the bank, Jho Low ordered an unusual transfer. The money didn't go to the joint ventures account. It went to an account in Zurich at RBS Coutts Bank in the name of an entity called Good Star Limited. When the bank's compliance officers asked, "Who owns Goodstar?" Low and his associates lied. They said it was owned by the Saudi government. It was a lie. The only real beneficiary of Goodstar Limited was Jho Low. Imagine the audacity. With a single click, $700 million destined for the development of a third world country turned into the personal savings account of a 28-year-old, and this was just the beginning. Later, they used another shell company with a deceptive name, Abar Investments PJS Limited. The name was almost identical to a real Abu Dhabi fund called Abar Investments PJS. The only difference was the word limited at the end. It was the corporate equivalent of selling a Rolex watch instead of a Rolex. But the banks, eager to process the fees, accepted the transfer. Billions flowed through these fake pipes. And now, Jho Low had to do the hardest thing of all, spend it. What do you do with unlimited access to billions of dollars? Jho Low tried to fill an infinite void with objects. He began a consumption spree that defied logic. He didn't buy out of necessity, he bought out of boredom. He acquired a penthouse at the Time Warner Center in New York for $30 million. A mansion in Beverly Hills for $39 million. He bought art not because he liked it, but because of the price tag. A Basquiat for $9 million. A Monet. A Picasso. But his most notorious expenses were his gifts. He gave model Miranda Kerr diamonds worth $8 million, including a heart-shaped pendant. He gave Leonardo DiCaprio the original Oscar that Marlon Brando won for On the Waterfront. And then there was the yacht. The Equanimity, $250 million, 91 meters long. It was more than a boat. It was a floating sovereign nation where Low could hide. His parties in Las Vegas became legendary. In a single night, playing baccarat, he could lose or win millions, leaving $100,000 tips for the waiters. It was the Great Gatsby on steroids. But Low wanted something more permanent than champagne. He wanted a legacy. Here we reach the core of the irony. Jho Low and Riza Aziz founded Red Granite Pictures in Hollywood. Nobody knew where their money came from. In Hollywood, nobody asks too many questions if the check clears. They decided to finance a script that had been floating around studios for years, considered too risky and obscene to produce. The Wolf of Wall Street. The budget was $100 million. Low paid for everything. Think about this. While Martin Scorsese was directing scenes about Jordan Belfort, laundering money in Switzerland, taping cash to his body to cross borders, the men paying his wages were doing exactly the same thing in real life. Making illegal transfers from Malaysia to Switzerland, then to New York, and finally to Hollywood. The production of the movie was literally a money laundering exercise. When the film was released, it was a critical and commercial success. Jho Low had become a movie tycoon, but there was a problem. A Ponzi scheme, or embezzlement of this magnitude, requires a constant flow of new money to plug old holes. And in 2014, the money stopped flowing. One MDB had to pay interest on those massive bonds Goldman Sachs had issued. But they didn't have the money. They had spent it all on yachts, diamonds, and movies. They tried to launch an IPO of their energy assets to raise fresh funds, but the market was suspicious. The accounts didn't add up. Inside the organization, panic began to grow. And then, the unpredictable human factor appeared. Xavier Justo, a former Swiss executive at PetroSaudi, the partner company in the scam, was disgruntled. He felt he was owed money. Before leaving, he copied 227,000 emails from the company's servers. He tried to sell the information. Finally, the data reached Claire Rue-Castle-Brown, a British journalist who ran a blog called Sarawak Report, and journalists from the Wall Street Journal. What they found in those emails was the treasure map. They saw the names, they saw the routes. They saw emails from Jho Low giving explicit instructions. Do not use my name, use Gmail accounts, destroy the messages. In July 2015, the Wall Street Journal published the bombshell. Nearly $700 million had ended up in the personal accounts of the Prime Minister of Malaysia. The world stopped. The response was global. The FBI launched the largest asset seizure operation in its history under the Kleptocracy Asset Recovery Initiative. The target, recover more than $1 billion in assets purchased with dirty money. The US government seized the yacht Equanimity. They seized the properties in New York and Los Angeles. They forced Miranda Kerr and Leonardo DiCaprio to return the gifts. DiCaprio had to hand over Marlon Brando's Oscar and a Picasso to the FBI. Goldman Sachs, the untouchable giant, was forced to pay more than $5 billion in global fines and admit its role in the scheme. Prime Minister Najib Razak lost the election in Malaysia, was arrested, and sentenced to 12 years in prison. But what happened to the mastermind? What happened to Jho Low? Just before the net closed, Low disappeared. He is believed to have fled to China, moving between Macau, Shanghai, and Beijing, protected by security services, living in luxury hotels, still spending what remains of his hidden fortune. To this day, he remains a fugitive. The 1MDB scandal is not just a story about a theft. It is an autopsy of the modern financial system. It proved that if the check is big enough, banks don't ask questions, auditors look the other way, and Hollywood gives you an award. The next time you watch a movie about the perfect crime, remember that sometimes the real scam isn't on the screen, it's in the credits. This was a missing record file. Subscribe if you want to understand the real price of what you consume.